how the Toronto Maple Leafs can get heavier on both forward and defense in just one trade. Now, before I get started here, I was about to sign up for a new subscription for Hockey News, and they have this gold package in which they give away 3 digital subscriptions. And so I was thinking of having a contest on my YouTube channel here to give away one of those for both my current subscribers and one for new subscribers. But I wanted to gauge the interest out there with you guys to see what you thought of it. So please tell me what you think in the comments section, and maybe I'll move forward with that either later this week or early next week. Let's jump into it, shall we? Now, we're talking about a trade between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Philadelphia Flyers. Let's get to the basics of it first. To Toronto, Wayne Simmonds and Radko Gudas. To Philadelphia, Andreas Johnson and Nikita Zaitsev, along with some draft picks being swapped in both directions. Now, let's talk about the nitty-gritty here. The potential cap space of the Philadelphia Flyers is just over $8,500,000. The Toronto Maple Leafs, we're talking just over $4 million. The potential performance bonuses for Philly is just under $5 million, and just right at $5,400,000 for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Let's take a close look at Wayne Simmonds here first. Now, he plays both wings. He's 30 years old, 6'2", 185 pounds, and he plays like a heavy player, like Babcock's been crying for the last little while. He hits, he goes into the corners, he stands in front of the net, he gets those junk goals, and he'll stand up for your teammates, when necessary. This will be his last season before he becomes a UFA. He'll be making just under $4 million, $3,975,000 to be exact. This season so far, in 54 games, he's had 16 goals, 8 assists for 24 points, and a minus 15. Not the greatest there, but remember, up until the last 8 games or so, Philly hasn't been playing the most inspiring hockey, let's call it that, as well. Now, one could also argue that, Simmonds has been a minus player for almost all his career, except for one in LA where he was a plus 22, interestingly enough. I know as well that last year Simmonds he played through a lot of injuries, one of them being in his hand. Speaking of which, in last season, in 75 games, he had 22 goals, 24 assists for 46 points, and was a minus 16. Not bad for a player who's playing through a few injuries. But again, this is the type of player, a heavy player, who sticks up for his teammates, the Leafs could really use in the playoffs. So he's basically the star of this package. Going back the other way, let's jump to what Philly would get in Andreas Johnson. He's a left wing, so he plays the same position. He's 24 years old. He's 6 years younger. He's 5'10", 181 pounds. Not as big. Not what I'd call a heavy player, but he mucks it up. He mucks it up in the corners, in front of the net. He gets a lot of those dirty goals, and he's a potential 25 to 30 goal scorer. Now, this will be his last season until he becomes a restricted free agent, and this season he's making $787,500. Now, he had a really slow start to the season. In which case, if the Leafs kept him, whatever team that would have him, they could probably get away with paying him anywhere from, I want to say, around $3 million over about 3 years. So they can get him on the cheap, and he's got a really high roof. So far this season, in 47 games, he's had 13 goals, 14 assists for 27 points, and is a plus 16. So he's also very responsible defensively as well. And he got off to a really slow start, I want to say, in the first 20 games of the season. And part of that being, I think, because he played through the playoffs with the Toronto Marlies, Toronto's AHL affiliate, last season, and they won the Calder Cup. And he was also the Calder Cup MVP. He had over a point per game in those playoffs. He was amazing. Now, before that happened, last season, he played 9 games for the Leafs. I was towards the end of the season, I want to say, in which he got 2 goals, 1 assist for 3 points, and he was a -2. Then in the playoffs, he replaced Komarov after about 3-4 games, and in 3 games he had, I want to say, a goal and 2 assists, or 2 goals and 1 assist. But he was a real spark plug. You can see there was a huge difference out there, and he just got better. Now, after that, he went back to the AHL, and like I said earlier, he won the Calder Cup with the Toronto Marlies, got the MVP, yada yada yo. But during the regular season with the Marlies, he played 54 games, had 26 goals and 28 assists for 54 points. He was a point-a-game player in the AHL. So there's a lot of promise there. He's got a high ceiling. Philly would be getting back, getting a lot younger, and be getting back a spectacular player who they could keep quite cheaply, at least for the next few years as well. Let's move back to the Philadelphia side, or what Toronto would be getting as well in return. So the second part of that package, Radka Gudas, he's a right shot defenseman, which Toronto needs. And he's 28 years old, he's 6'2", and he's 204 pounds. And he also plays a heavy game. He's more on the defensive side, stay-at-home kind of deep defenseman. He hits, he clears the front of the net. Again, a player Babcock would love, especially in the playoffs. Now, he will become an unrestricted free agent after the 2019-20 season, so the season after next. And he'd be making $3,350,000 a season. So far, this year in 52 games, he's had 2 goals, 11 assists for 13 points, and a +9 on a Philly team. I know, Carter Hart. They just had their 8-game win streak broken the other day against LA of all teams. Strangely enough, in a shootout. So that could be part of it, but he seems to always has had a good plus-minus, and I know to some people that doesn't mean much, and blah blah blah. But last season in 70 games, he had 2 goals and 14 assists for 16 points, and he was dead even in the plus-minus category on a team which wasn't known for its defensive capabilities. And I know Provorov and Gostisbehere had really good seasons last year, offensively speaking. So, but Philly's goaltending, as it was for most of this season, was quite a circus. In any case, now that we know for the most part what the Leafs would be getting, let's move to the last big piece. What the Flyers would be getting. Now, the Toronto can't make this deal unless they move out some salary, because they've only just over $4 million in projected cap space here. And with Andreas Johansson, you're looking at just over $5 million altogether. And we don't know per se what those player performance bonuses and what might come out to. I'm sure some of them are strapped to Andreas Johansson, which he wouldn't get anyway, although he's Calder, I always mix those up. In which he couldn't get Rookie of the Year because he had such a slow start, and number-wise, he wouldn't hit any of those bonuses, again, because the first 20 games, he was in a bit of a fog. But Toronto would need to send a player the other way, and that would be Nikita Zaitsev. He's also a right-shot defenseman, so they'd be swapping D there, who's 27-year-old, so he's a year younger than Gudas. He's 6'2", 190 pounds, fairly big guy. And the catch here is that he's signed through the 2023-24 season. So 5 more seasons after this one until he becomes a UFA at $4.5 million a season. Now, this season so far, in 53 games, he's had 1 goal, 5 assists for 6 points, and he's been a +1. That's actually not bad, considering the how poorly the Leafs have been playing in the past, I want to say 15 games or so. The record hasn't been the most spectacular. And Babcock, for some odd reason, has been pairing him with Jake Gardiner recently, who you all know is not a defensive specialist by any means beyond the imagination. He puts up decent amount of points, but he is not defensively responsible. And putting those two guys together, Zaitsev has some offensive capabilities to him, has a real decent shot, but doesn't use it much because he's used more in the defensive side of things. In any case, that Jake Zaitsev, that Gardner-Zaitsev pairing was a bit of a disaster, and you could say maybe that was partly responsible for that. And the fact that, Anderson, their Leafs goalie, was hurt for a while, yada, yada, yo. Last season, in which a lot of people considered his worst, in 60 games played, because he had a concussion, and he had a couple of other injuries. He had his first kid. In any case, he only played 60 games. He had 5 goals, 8 assists for 13 points, but he was still a +8. He was still really good in the defensive zone. So he's definitely showed himself clawing back out of it this year. For the most part, in a lot of the games, he's been showing the promise that he led Toronto to believe he had in the first place, because in the season before last, is in which they signed him straight out of the KHL, he had a terrific season. And then Lou Lamoriello handed him this was a 7 or 8 year contract for $4.5 a year. Now, the Leafs just, because of the Austin Matthews signing, I know I don't have to tell you all this, but and the Mitch Marner signing, which will be coming up pretty soon, after the Nylander signing, they're hitting a cap crunch. They don't have much space. They need to get rid of some money. They have some players in the AHL who could probably step up on right defense next year, but right now they need some. Not only do they need a little bit of cap breathing room, but they need more of a defensively reliable, heavy player on that right D, who they could probably pair with Gardner. And that's where Radko Gudas would come in hand. Now, Zaitsev to the Flyers, he definitely has a higher roof. He has a higher potential. And I know the Flyers have got a couple players in the minors. One right shot D comes to mind in particular. I want to say Philip Myers, who's like 6'5", 195 pounds. So he probably needs to put a bit more meat on him, but he's like 22 years old. So and the Flyers do have options on right D. And so, but before I babble on about that, let's also talk about the draft picks, which I have here swapping sides. So Toronto, I have getting Philly's 2019 5th round pick and their 2020 6th round pick. To Philly, Philly would get Toronto's 2019 3rd round pick and Toronto's 2020 4th rounder. So basically, Philly gets an upgrade in their draft rankings, and Toronto gets a downgrade. Obviously, there's a lot of debate to have over this. Do you think this is brilliant? Do you think it needs some work? Or do you think I've been drinking too much blue Kool-Aid? I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comments section, obviously. And don't forget about, speaking of the hockey news, if you think that contest would be of interest to you, getting a free digital subscription, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that as well. Hit like if you like this video, smash that subscribe button if you haven't already, and hey, if you happen to have any Hockey Geek friends, please don't feel shy about sharing. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon. Watch Toronto go and make this trade right after I get this up. You know it's going to happen.